caught you.
What?
Sitting down on the job.
I'm not sitting down on the job. I'm harvesting my vegetable garden.
There's always a reason, isn't there?
I planted this 6 weeks ago, and I can't help it if I'm smart enough to do vegetable gardening in such a way so that gardening is fun and not work.
Has it really only been 6 weeks?
6
and you've
weeks.
got that much pea plant already?
And I haven't touched this since the day it was planted. I've done nothing to it except for the irrigation that comes on automatically in the nursery. Other than that, I haven't touched this garden.
Well, I'm going bowling.
Either that or you're going to be making pina coladas a little later today.
Well, maybe later on, but to start with, we're going to actually talk about coconuts, not in the pina colada or bowling sense, but in the horticultural sense, in terms of what it actually is and what it does. And I'm not going to tell you the details yet, but I'll give you a hint. I'm going to talk about plant propagation, just sort of in a fun overview sort of way, not the nitty-gritty details.
And I'm going to give an update on the vegetable garden, where we are at this point, what the next step is. Now that we've gotten the frost out of the way, we're going to plant some tomatoes and take it the next step. Hi, I'm Tina Bemis.
And I'm Ed Bemis.
Welcome to Bloomin' with the Bemises. Ed, you want to pee?
Sure.
So this is our little vegetable garden, our little lettuce garden that we planted 6 weeks ago. You can see that the lettuce is all ready to harvest here. We've actually harvested the lettuce that was in the back row. We're going to defy the law of physics and make two plants take up the same place at the same time. So I'm going to plant some peppers in this open spot and then harvest some of this lettuce. And as the peppers grow, we'll harvest the rest of the lettuce, and both plants will be in the same place at the same time. So I'm going to do that while Ed teaches you the next thing.
I'm going to tell my physics teacher about that, because I really thought that you couldn't have two things occupy the same space at the same time.
You can.
See, I learned something today. Okay. I said that we were going to talk about coconuts, and we are. And coconuts, actually, horticulturally speaking, botanically speaking, are a seed. And there's all kinds of different seeds, ranging from, the size of a coconut, and this is, a moderate-sized coconut. But once the husks are on it, because you have to remember, this is the inside of the coconut. The actual husk makes it be, the size of a head or the size of a good-sized head when it comes off the tree, before the husks fall off of it. And so this is one of the kinds of seed. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have portulaca. And that's not actually the smallest seed. The smallest seed is really almost like dust. But this, let me just give you a point of comparison here. And we're going to zoom in and take a look at this. But this is portulaca seed. Just really, really tiny. I mean, I don't know how many seeds are in my hand, but I don't know, 300 is my guess. There's just lots and lots and lots of them in there. And seeds, as you can see, they certainly run the gamut. Be careful not to spill this all over the place, because I'll have portulaca coming up in all my other things later on. So there we go. Now, we've done programs on seed starting, and this isn't going to be a program on seed starting. It's not really going to be a program on any one particular part of plant propagation in depth. Before the program, I looked up a couple of things. One, I looked up pina colada, because I couldn't remember if that was a drink that you had in a coconut. And the other thing that I looked up was propagate, and what did the word mean. And the propagate is to increase in quantity or amount. And that's what plant propagation is all about, taking one and making many, whether it's taking one plant and letting it go to seed, and then you collect many seeds off of it. And I think everybody can probably think about a dandelion, and certainly a dandelion is a great example of making many from one. The dandelion flower goes to seed, you blow on it, the seeds blow all over the place, and you've got, each one of those probably has 200 seeds, I'm guessing. I don't really know, I never counted. But and each dandelion plant has, over the course of its life, 15 or 20 flowers each spring, probably. So you do the math, and that's an awful lot of plants, awful lot of seeds from one plant. And so it's really easy to propagate plants with seed and make large numbers. Unfortunately, and you know, probably less so with coconut, because we can plant these portulaca seeds in a tray like this that has cells in it, and then we can end up with something like this. The coconut, a lot harder to fit into the cell. But anyway, but one of the limitations of propagating from seed is that it doesn't come true to type. That's what we call it. Meaning that if you have, this is a phlox. This is volcano phlox. And I never really was a great tall phlox fan, because they've had some problems in terms of mildew diseases over the course of the summer. You'd see it, they'd lose their bottom leaves. Volcano phlox is so good. That's the only phlox that I like to see people plant now. It's just head and shoulders above all the rest of them. Now, if you let this go to seed when it flowers later on in the year, and collect the seed and plant the seed, you'll think, okay, great, I've got some volcano phlox. Well, you don't. You've got seedlings of volcano phlox, and some of those seed may have some slight resemblance to the original parent, but I would suspect that probably the vast majority, and I'm guessing now, pure guessing, but 95% of those seedlings are not going to come true to type at all, may be disease susceptible, probably are going to be a different color or a different shade of the color that you collected the seed from on that plant. And so then we have to do something a little bit different. We can't grow them from seed, so we have to find another way. Now, we've talked about division before on this program. We've talked about dividing hosta and daylilies, and this is a hosta. This is a hosta, right? This is a daylily. And this is a daylily that we could take out of the pot. I'm not going to spend the time to do it right now, but we could take it out of this pot and divide it probably into 15 to 22-ish individual plants. This is a fairly small leafed one, so there's a lot of little divisions that we can get off of here. That sounds like an awful lot, and it is, except that if you're trying to create very large numbers in a commercial sense, 22 or 15 really isn't all that many plants, and we're looking to be able to make a lot more. So just for point of comparison, to get one plant, if we took a single division of this, we'd need to let it grow probably 3 years would be my guess. And in those 3 years, we could get, out of 3 years, we could get maybe 15 plants. So that's 5 a year. Okay.
That's what we used to do for the daylilies, Ed. We'll plant them for about 3 years and then divide every third one.
Because if you try to do it too often, you can divide it after a year, but you're not really going to get much out of it. So in terms of getting the most bang for the effort, it's going to make the most sense to wait a little bit longer. And so, about 3 years from the time that you plant it until the time that it's dividable. So we're going to set this back down again. And so division certainly is one way you can do it, but if you're trying to make large numbers, or it's a plant you don't necessarily want to dig up. Your friend says, okay, I'd love to share this plant with you, but I don't really trust your horticultural skills a whole lot, so I really don't want you to dig it up out of my yard and divide it into little itsy-bitsy pieces. There's other ways, and one of the other ways is cuttings. And cuttings, we're going to set this back down underneath so I've got a little bit more room to work here. And
I hope you like salad for dinner.
Oh.
We waited a little too long to harvest these because I wanted to show this on the next episode, so lots and lots of lettuce.
Well, I've been sneaking a little bit out of there at night, in case you didn't notice. I've been trying to take it from the back so it didn't show. Anyway, and this is a plant called lamium. And you say, oh, they're always talking in those horticultural botanical names. Why do they call it lamium? Why don't they have a good common name for it? Well, its common name is dead nettle, and I'd much rather call it lamium than dead nettle. It needs a new name. We should have a contest. We should have a, name the plant, the new name for the plant contest. And lamium is one of those plants that roots really easily from a cutting. Now, what is a cutting? Sometimes you hear the word cutting and not really sure what it means, and that's fine. That's why we're here. This is a cutting. And what we did was we took a sharp knife, really important, sharp, because if you just use pruning shears or try to pinch it off with your fingers, it's going to crush the cells and you're going to end up with dead tissue at the bottom. It's going to take, potentially you're going to have some rot starting there, so you don't want to do that. We want to take a sharp knife. I like a razor blade knife because I can throw the blade away and not have to worry about sharpening it. And we're going to take a little tip cutting like this. Now every plant's a little bit different in terms of how big a cutting you can take from it, and the time of the year that you can take a cutting from it. Not everything can be propagated easily by cuttings. Some things can. Lamium is one of them. And lamium, if you were to roll this in your fingers, you'd feel that the stem is kind of square because it's in the mint family. It's not invasive like most of the mint, but it's a great ground cover. And the mints in general root really, really easily because they have almost like preformed roots right under the stems. They pop out new roots, oh, what, Tina, 6 days?
Probably about 12 days.
12 days?
12 days.
Okay, you're much better on timing than I am. I'm just very impatient. Okay, so we have this cutting, and we're going to prune off these bottom leaves because we don't want to stick those in the soil, which is what we're going to end up doing with it. And we're taking this short piece. Now, as I said, some of the other things you can take different size cuttings. Some things you can get away with a longer cutting, so you've got a little bit bigger plant once it does root. Some things, willow, for example, you can take cuttings from, stems as thick as my thumb, cut them into 10-inch or 5-foot pieces, stick them in the ground, and they'll root. But that same sort of thing, they're really easy to root kinds of plants. Some of the things that aren't so easy to root, and I'll tell you this right up front so you don't get excited and say, I'm going to go out and take all these cuttings of maple trees and rhododendrons and all these other things. A lot of things don't root really easily from cuttings or don't root at all from cuttings. Now, we're really fortunate with a lot of plants, perennials particularly, that you can root them from cutting right during the growing season when you're thinking of it. Some of the other things like junipers or rhododendrons or a whole host of other kinds of plants like to be taken either in the fall or over the winter months when they're dormant. You put it in a really low temperature environment and you let it sit there for a long time. And in that case, we're not talking about 12 days, we're talking about 12 weeks or multiple months.
What do you mean by
cases.
What do you mean by low temperature environment?
Good question. Low temperature meaning you don't want to put it in a 75-degree greenhouse or kitchen. You're aiming to put it somewhere where it's, maybe 45 degrees or 50 degrees, depending on what the plant is and what kind of cutting. Now, we're out in the, it's 70 degrees today, 75 degrees today, and so we're going to be keeping it in a warm environment because these are going to root really quickly, and we want to encourage that with a moderately high temperature. So anyway, this is one of the easy to root kinds of things. Now, a lot of times you'll see ads for rooting powder, and rooting powder, it certainly is something that works really well. But for the easy to root things, you don't really even need to use the rooting powder. It evens, on a commercial scale, it evens out the rooting so that it roots more uniformly, maybe a little bit more quickly, but primarily it's just for grower convenience. On a homeowner scale, the easy to root things will root without it. The hard to root things, they won't even root with it. So you might as well, in my opinion, you might as well save your money and not spend it on the rooting powder, but just root the easy to root things and leave the hard to root things up to somebody else. I have a challenging time rooting a lot of the hard to root things, and I've been doing it for years. So leave that up to somebody else and just stick to the easy things, the soft things. So lamium, we've cut the bottom leaves off. I'm going to get back on track now. And all we do, we take a tray of, this happens to be just regular growing mix. You can use that. You can use sand. You can use peat moss and sand, peat moss and perlite. There's as many recipes as there are propagators. The propagators all have their pretty strongly held biases towards what mix works on what plants when. In our case, again, since this is an easy to root thing, it really doesn't matter what you use. Any of those mixes will work fine. And all we're going to do is we're going to stick it in just up to that bottom set of leaves. So we're sticking the bottom about inch in the soil mix like that. And then we can just keep on taking cuttings. We're aiming to take it right below where these leaves come off. Now, horticulturalists all have all kinds of names for things. It's called a node. but you don't need to know that. We're going to just call it the place where those leaves come off of. So we're going to cut off these 2 leaves, and then we're just going to stick it in right next to. We want to leave a little, so they're just barely touching, but that's about the extent of it. We can fill up this whole tray, or you can get 6 of them, whatever it is that you want. We're going to water it in. Now, here's the hard part. They need to stay moist, but not wet. Now, in a commercial sense, we'd have a greenhouse with a mist system and, potentially fog and all sorts of temperature controls. Realistically, you're not going to go through that aggravation more than likely. You're going to have to, find a place to put it. So what we're going to do is we're going to put it at a shady location. We're going to either put a white piece of fabric over it that we can keep moist if it's in a really shaded location, or we're going to put it in a plastic bag. But it has to absolutely not get any direct sun, because if it gets direct sun, you're going to have cooked lamium. They root pretty nice at 75 degrees. They don't really root too nice at 125 degrees. It's like lettuce that you leave out on the counter. It's going to be wilted in no time, because these little guys don't have any way of, getting moisture in very easily. And so we have to keep them from losing moisture. That's the key. Keep the leaf surface moist so that it doesn't lose some moisture.
Speaking of leaving lettuce out on the counter, this is my harvest of lettuce that we just got from the vegetable garden, and I'm going to go put that somewhere so that it doesn't just wilt while you keep talking about propagating.
How about a nice big chicken cutlet sandwich?
That would be a Dagwood size amount of lettuce on your chicken cutlet sandwich.
That sounds really good. I like that idea.
Okay, I'll be back.
Okay. And so that really is all there is to it for cuttings. Again, that's the easy to root kinds of things. Now, I just want to show this for fun, and Tina may be talking about this later, so I may be stealing her thunder a little bit, but we're going to take this tomato plant out, and if we look really closely right in here, you'll see some little rootlets that are coming right out of the stem above the soil level. That's what the lamium are going to look like in about 10 days, 12 days. You'll have these little root nubbins coming out, and they're going to develop into full-blown roots over the next several days or several week period. Some things have roots right at the surface like that. I said lamium, the mints in general, willow. Tomatoes are not notorious, but notable for the fact that they've got those little root nubbins coming in there. Now, there's another thing that you can do, and so let me back up just 1 second. We talked about that daylily in a 3-year period you could get 15 cuttings, so 15 divisions, so 5 plants a year out of that. With this lamium, we can probably take 25 cuttings right now off of this plant, and any of the ones that are in bloom, we've got to kind of cut the flower off. I know that's really cruel, but having the flower on it impedes its ability to root, so we're going to pop those right back off, and we're going to end up with something like this. So if we can get 20 off of it now, and then if we wait another 3 weeks, we can get 20 off of it then. If we wait another 3 weeks, we can get 20 off of it then. We can probably do that a bunch of times. So it wouldn't be unreasonable to be able to get 150 cuttings in 1 year versus 5 divisions in 1 year from the daylily. So you can see why it makes sense from a commercial point of view to do cuttings, and it also makes sense if you're trying to propagate something like a ground cover that you need lots and lots and lots of. If you're trying to propagate, maple tree, most people don't need lots and lots and lots of them, so there's other methods that probably make more sense. So that's the stem cutting. Now, just to make it more confusing, there's other kinds of cuttings that we can do. Now this phlox, we take it right out of the pot here. You can see all of these roots that are growing right up against where the pot was. That's not pot bound. Sometimes people say, oh, it's pot bound. It's not pot bound. Those are just the roots that are growing up against the edge of the pot. But we are going to take, being careful not to cut our fingers off, because I had a Ginsu knife incident with those chicken cutlets the other night. So we're going to be careful not to reenact that. But you can take root cuttings, not all plants, but on tall phlox specifically, you can take root cuttings. All you do is you just scrape away some of the soil, lay them in there, cover them over, keep it moist, and each one of those little root pieces that you put in there, I wouldn't want to put a little piece in, but you know, a decent sized chunk, is going to develop into a plant. I had years ago, I had a starfire phlox up in a propagation area. I dug the plant, and then the next spring I came back, and lo and behold, everywhere where there had been a root that I had left in the ground, there was a little starfire phlox coming up from. So I inadvertently probably made about 50 plants from digging that, in addition to the 15 that I got from dividing it. So sometimes root cuttings can make sense. A little bit unusual. It's not something you hear about very often. It's not something that works for every kind of plant, but it is something that can be used at least in some cases.
Hey, Ed.
Yes.
Is there a resource of places where you might be able to find what plants you can take root cuttings on? Because you've given that as an option, but like you said, not every plant can that be propagated that way.
I wish I had a good answer to that, and I don't. There are a number of texts that I've used over the years, but they're typically much more technically oriented with the. I said I didn't want to cover the nitty-gritty in this episode. And you're asking a great question in terms of resource for the viewers to find. And I don't really have an answer for where you can get real-life propagation information. I'm sure that you can Google root cuttings and be able to come up with some pretty reputable lists from some of the educational resources. You have to be, anytime you're researching anything on the internet, you have to be careful because anybody can publish a web page. But if it's an EDU site, generally speaking, it's a pretty safe bet. You'd want to make sure that it's, a similar climate to ours. Yeah. But I think that would probably be my best suggestion. I don't really, there's thousands of books out there on plant propagation, but a lot of times they kind of make it a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. And there's a lot of figurative weeding that you have to do before you can actually make your cuttings happen.
I think if I was doing it, I would probably just Google root cuttings, perennials, and see what lists might come up, because there's not a lot that can be. It's a really, really cool way to do it, but there's not a lot that can be done that way. So I just wanted to make. You said it a couple of times, but it's not everything. So
the world has changed so rapidly in that way that it used to be we had to have an encyclopedia or go to the library or go buy the book. And now you can have it at your fingertips instantly, so it's kind of cool. Even though the roots aren't going to root instantly, you can have the information practically instantly. Okay. And there's other methods. Again, I'm just going to touch on them really briefly because it's more involved and it's more detail-oriented. I'm not trying to make this be every little last bit and piece of information. But grafting is one way where you're actually taking two different plants or two different plant parts and physically joining them together. There's another way for some of the difficult to root plants, and it's called layering. Can you hand me that rhododendron?
Sure.
This is a glow rhododendron.
While you show people how to layer, I'm going to pick the rest of these peas.
Okay. With layering, what you're doing is you're having the mother plant support the young plant and getting it to root all at the same time, as opposed to the lamium where the mother plant is no longer supporting it because that umbilical cord has been cut. We are going to take this and we're actually going to find a branch that we can bend down to the ground that's flexible enough. When with rhododendrons that sometimes is a little challenging, but we're going to bend it down to the ground. Oops, see, I broke it. So we're going to take that right off. And we're going to find a different branch. Okay, here's one. And we're pretending this is actually planted in the ground. We're going to bend this down so it's touching the ground. We're going to take a sharp knife and pluck off any leaves that happen to still be there. We're going to make a scrape on the back side. It doesn't have to be a huge, we're talking, 3/4 of an inch or something like that. Just like that. And then we're going to put it down on the ground, take a handful of soil, throw it on top, put a rock on top to weight it down, and then we're going to come back and check on it. But we're not going to come back and check on it in a week because it won't look any different. We're not going to check on a month because it won't look any different. We're probably going to come back and check on it in 6 months or a year. And after that period of time, assuming that it's rooted in, then you can cut it, kind of sever it from the mother plant, and you've got your own nice little rhododendron. And that will work for some things. If you can't get the branch down to the ground, there is another cool technique called air layering, and I'll just mention this really quickly. But basically what you're doing is you're layering with handfuls of moist sphagnum moss that then you wrap some saran wrap and then wrap aluminum foil off around to keep it from heating up in there. And that stays right on the stem, and that works for some plants, and it's kind of a cool technique. Make your friends and neighbors ask questions, if nothing else, what those aluminum balls are doing on your plants. They may be concerned that you're afraid the space aliens are talking to your rhododendrons, but it's kind of a cool thing anyway. So that's kind of the real quick propagation talk, and just to expose you to a little bit of what goes on kind of behind the scenes at a production nursery when we're trying to make many from one.
So I've just harvested some of these peas off of this plant. One of the things that people ask me, how many peas should I plant for a family of 4? I hate that question. It depends on how many peas you like to eat. I could eat peas just for dinner, and I could have a whole big bowl full of them and just eat that. And some people, they're trying to get their kids to eat, a little handful of edible potted peas. So I don't know how to answer that question. There's charts, and look it up on the internet, and then just go from there. Just plant some and eat them. So we've got some peas here, but again, I just wanted to reiterate, today is June 1st. A lot of times at Memorial Day, right around the end of May, people are ready to plant their vegetable gardens. And just the other day, somebody said, do you have any pea seeds? And I get really, really frustrated because everybody doesn't know everything that there is to know about gardening. You needed to have planted peas 6 weeks ago because they like it really, really cold. They should be up here by now. June 1st, it's too late. You don't plant your whole vegetable garden Memorial Day weekend. Plant the cool stuff early and the warm stuff later. So 6 weeks later, this is what it looks like. We've harvested a whole bunch of this lettuce. I'm going to leave a little bit more here. It's probably starting to go to seed, but because I was trying to keep this as long as I could to tape the next episode, I'm just going to leave it for a few more days. But I did harvest back here. I planted 4 peppers in their place. And at the bottom of the peppers, you might notice some wilted lettuce. I took some of the pieces that were no good, that were covered with a whole bunch of dirt or soil. I guess it's dirt if it's on your lettuce leaves. Some of the rotten pieces, and I just took them and I put them at the base of the lettuce, at the base of the peppers, excuse me, and to act as mulch. Might as well just, make the mulch happen, regenerate the garden right away. So that's all there is here. As one thing goes by and you harvest it, you can just keep planting successive crops. Let's see what's going on at the next garden. So over here on our next bed, there really isn't that much going on yet. There's some more peas to be harvested. The broccoli is really getting good sized, and the cauliflower is getting good sized. These are our little onions that were just little itsy bitsy onion sets, and maybe we can get a little before and after picture of the before when we just planted this six weeks ago around April 15th, and then our after picture here.
I always like I thought vegetable gardens are pretty. Sometimes a lot of times people don't appreciate vegetable gardens for how beautiful they really are. But broccoli leaves and the fresh, nice greens of the onions, in addition to being tasty, are kind of pretty.
There is a lot of texture to be had here. Although for color right now, there's just a lot of green, and there's actually a little bit of lemony green. And I don't remember, did I ever feed this bed when I did this one on the show? I'm not sure. I'm kind of comparing this one here to the ones in the pots, which I know had a lot of fertilizer. I think I was a little bit skimpy on the fertilizer, so sometimes 6 weeks later it's a good time to go by and just say, hey, I'm starting to harvest these peas, and I'm just going to give those a little bit more fertilizer. Again, this is our wonderful Plant Organic or 888 fertilizer. I'm not measuring, I'm just sprinkling it like I was feeding chickens, but it is 1 cup per 9 square feet if you want to have the rate. And that's all we have to do to this bed for now. Come back a little while and start to harvest the broccoli, but it's too soon.
Now, one of the things that you had mentioned on the previous bed was about how many feet of row and when you plant. And you know, vegetable gardening, I won't say it has rules, but it has some firm guidelines. And because you know, peas don't like the heat of the summer, they like it cool. Peas are like my kind of plant. They like it cool, early part of the season. I'm not a beach guy. I'm a mountain guy. When I go on vacation, that's where I'd like to go. Peas feel like I do. And on our website, which will be on the bottom of the screen, there is some extension publications which detail how many feet of row that you need in order to grow the plants, you know, for an appropriate size family, and also timing guidelines in terms of when things need to get planted, you know, adapted for our area. So a little bit of guidance, because there's a lot of people who are new to vegetable gardening this year. Really exciting time for us, because we have people who are coming in who maybe haven't gardened or haven't gardened for years. And it's really fun to see new people come in and you know, be getting their fingers dirty and dirt under their fingernails with the vegetable gardening.
And it's really frustrating for us when somebody comes in and they're really excited about planting peas, and I have to tell them you should have done it 6 weeks ago. So we don't expect you to know everything right away, but maybe after watching the show you'll know a little bit more. Shall we go on to the next bed, Ed?
Yeah.
Okay. Before we get on to the next new bed, there's one more thing that we have to touch base with, and that is our spud barrel, or our trash can potatoes. And looking into here, I see that they are starting to go up. They're about 8 or 10 inches tall, and it's time to fill in the bottom of those with some compost, rotten leaves, weeds that you've collected. So we're just going to take, I got some of the lettuce and some weeds from the garden, and I'm going to put those around, all around the base, and just start to fill it up. And we're also going to put a little bit of potting soil in here too. It can just be more compost. I'm just going to spread that around the plants and just keep filling it in until the plants get to be, till the soil gets to be right to the base of the top of the leaves. So probably about another 8 inches of soil until you're done. And then it's probably a good idea to also take a little bit of fertilizer that time and just sprinkle a little bit of fertilizer in too. And that's the next step. That'll take care of it for another 4-6 weeks, and just keep doing that until the barrel is full. All right, on to this bed. This bed here, again, if you happen to have missed the last episode, this is our square foot gardening, and this is a 4x4 foot grid. And I'm going to fake it a little bit here, because I really want to take the most advantage of this amount of work that we did to make this bed as we can. And so instead of a 4x4 and 16 squares, I am going to make this 9 squares by 2 and 2. So like a little tic-tac-toe board here, because I want to get 3 big tomato plants in here. And I'm impatient. Everybody knows, God only knows that I'm impatient. Ed always says that I cook on 2 speeds, off and high, or off and burn, right? Off and burn. So we're going to put some really gigantamundo tomatoes in here. This is Better Boy tomato, and we're going to go ahead and plant 3 of these. And it's probably a little bit too close together. Usually you want to go about 2 to 4 feet apart. Where's my third one? I have a third one here somewhere. For the tomatoes. But what we're going to do here is we're going to really take advantage of the fact that I made a really, really wide aisle on this bed. We're going to take this one tomato, put it all the way to the edge, take the other tomato, put it all the way to this edge. And so in effect, it's not just this 4 feet that we're working in, but probably another 2 feet over to this side and 2 feet over to that side. So as long as you've got those way at the edge, and as long as you've got a nice wide enough aisle between the beds, then you don't have to prepare quite as much soil and just cram everything in there. So, it's a good thing I keep you around too.
I made a trip to the garden center to pick you up another tomato.
That's one of the nice advantages to owning a garden center. If I need more plants, I just go get them. So we're going to plant those 3 tomatoes, and there's just one little trick to planting tomatoes, and that, I think Ed alluded to that before. You want to do some of these, Ed, with me while I'm talking? And that is because tomatoes make a whole bunch of roots very, very easily along the stem, then you can in fact take tomatoes and bury them deeper. No other plant can you do that. I shoveled this all. You don't even need to use the shovel. You can do it with your hand.
I'm seeing that now.
I don't know, we might not even be able to get to do this too much deeper because I put this one down right on the surface of the hard soil. But if you can go a little bit deeper, it's safe. Here, I can even break some of these roots up here so that I can get it down a little bit deeper. Because you can bury this up a good 6 inches and it will just keep forming roots there. So we're going to put 3 tomatoes, again, right up against the edge there. And as we grow these guys here, we're going to put in this cool new little spiral stake here, tomato spiral plant support. And just stick that in the ground. And you just twirl the tomato around this little spiral here, spiraling it around, and in effect then you never really have to tie it onto there, you just weave it into the spirals. The other thing that you want to do with these tomatoes, if you're going to put them this close together, is take out all the little side shoots. You can let each side shoot make in effect its own tomato plant. But you get better tomatoes, you get more tomatoes, and you get them a little bit earlier if you take out the side shoots of the tomato plants as they grow. Everywhere the leaf reaches the stem, a new shoot will come out, and you just need to pluck those off. And that's an ongoing, whole season long process. So we've got three tomatoes there. In this same group here, we can probably get 4 peppers in the middle. So I'll plant 2 if you plant 2. So just put one along the edge and one here. Again, this soil has been very well prepared in advance, so that's all that you need to do. And then what else goes with peppers and tomatoes?
Peanuts. Didn't I tell you, the Found a Peanut song, which I will spare everybody me singing, but I found a peanut plant. I thought that'd be cool to plant in here. Except
peanut butter and tomatoes?
Yeah, absolutely. Isn't that one of the best food combinations of all time? Peanut butter and tomato? Or peanut butter and tomato sauce mixed together? No, maybe not.
I'll serve that to you tonight, honey.
Since it's square foot gardening, this one isn't really going to work because this is going to take 9 square feet on its own. So
9 square feet for one plant, so you'd need 3 squares.
Yeah, it makes about 25 to 50 peanuts. So I just thought it was kind of cool.
Well, what I think goes with tomatoes is basil. And so we're going to plant, this one here is an African blue basil, and this is grown from cuttings. Each one can get to be a foot. We're going to do this basil here. This one is Pesto Perpetuo, and this is actually a variegated basil, variegated meaning a green leaf and white leaf together. And so that's kind of cool. So we'll stick one of those guys in here too. And we'll tuck a few regular basils in it around also. What the heck?
Is this
I'll
purple
just
basil
harvest
going
it
over here?
Yeah, stick the purple basil in there. And stick another one of the green ones down there. So we've got that. And I'm even going to just sneak a little bit more because I just can't help myself. And we'll stick a couple of parsley plants in there too. We'll just tuck those in between the basil and the peppers. And that's all there is to vegetable garden except for one other step that I missed, which is
fertilizer.
Fertilizer. Again,
we don't want to have lime green plants.
Nope.
Lime green, chartreuse is a pretty color, but not on vegetable gardens.
So again, about a cup per 9 square feet, and this is 16 square feet, so somebody do the math, 1.5 cups, something like that. Again, I'm not measuring. This is about what it should look like when you're done. And that's all there is to this bed, and let's go on to our very last bed. If you happen to be just tuning in, just wanted to remind you that it is June 1st today, and we actually did have a frost last night here in Spencer, Massachusetts, or central Massachusetts, but I think we are all over with frost now, so it is safe to go ahead and plant pole beans, tomatoes, peppers, and all the different kinds of squashes and cucumbers. So that's what we're doing in our last bed here. So we've set this out with the square foot gardening method. If you want more information on square foot gardening and how to design these beds, you can go to squarefootgardening.com and get lots of information. We've modified this bed a little bit. Instead of 1 foot square pieces, I've given them, I don't know, whatever 4 divided by 3 is, 1.33 square feet, because I want to give my tomatoes just a little bit more room right now. But we're going to go ahead and plant some pole beans. And I've put some red twig dogwood branches and some, I don't know what this is, a maple tree. This is a casualty from the ice storm that was sitting in my front yard yesterday. And I just cut it off the big branch that fell, and I'm going to recycle and use it as a trellis for my pole beans. So just going to stick those in the ground. We had actually got a call. Somebody wanted to know if they could buy these branches. Well, they can buy the red twig dogwood plant, and it'll make those branches for them. So we're just going to take these pole beans, and pole beans get nice and tall. Going to just make a little trench here, put these seeds about 1 inch or 2 across from each other. Ed, you want to give me a hand here?
Sure.
Don't trip.
Now I just have to move the rhubarb.
Here you go. Sorry, I forget it takes you long to get down there on the ground there.
It's further for me to go.
Yeah, I know. So about 1 inch or 2 apart on these seeds. Again, you don't have to measure it, just stick them in there. And cover it over with about 1 inch or so of soil and tamp it down. The sprinklers are going to go off tonight here where this garden happens to be, so that'll water everything in. That's all we need to do for the pole beans. They'll grow up. I bet they're going to go. I bet I'm going to need to put even more bigger branches because they can get to be 6, 8 feet tall. It's going to grow up that irrigation pole. And then you're going to be mad at me when the irrigation doesn't do the nursery, but oh well. We're going to do 3 more tomatoes because I wanted to do some heirloom tomatoes too, and also one of the new cool grape hybrid tomatoes. So we might even be able to show, because this is a little bit smaller root system, how we can get this tomato planted way down low in there. That's the only plant that we like to do that with, is tomatoes planted any deeper than it already is. So that's Juliet. What did I do with the label? I think I buried it.
Because they'll root right along the stem. Now, one of the things about tomatoes is if you lose the label and trying to tell which one is which, you can't do it. With the exception, Brandywine. Some of the other heirlooms you can tell as well, but Brandywine has this really broad leaf. And you can tell the Brandywine look. It might not be Brandywine, but it'd be one of the heirlooms that are very similar to it.
I'm going to stick 3 of these little tomato trays in here too. What the heck? Just to helps mulch, helps the fertilizer go down, and apparently the red bounces infrared light and it makes the tomatoes grow faster. I don't know, but they just look cool. So we're going to put 3 of those next to 3 tomatoes. And then the very last plant that I'm going to plant is some cucumbers. There's one for you, Ed. Could you hand me the cucumber seeds, please? Thank you. Again, because this is an intensive method of growing, we're going to go with these bush cucumbers. The bush cucumber plants don't get to be 8 feet across. They get to be maybe 2 or maybe closer to 3 feet. So I'm going to put those in these 3 squares here and hope that they're going to sort of mulch, if you will, make a living mulch on the base of the tomatoes, but they're also going to spill out into this aisle and over into this aisle, effectively making the garden almost twice as big in terms of its productivity, but half as big in terms of how much you actually have to dig to prepare the soil. So we're going to just put several seeds in each hole. And we'll probably thin it out to 2 or 3. Can you just dig me a hole there for a second? And that's it. Cover them up, pat them down. What's the last thing, Ed?
Fertilize. While you're getting the fertilizer, one of the things that you mentioned was that some of these were heirloom tomatoes, as if we all know what an heirloom tomato is. And that's our job, is to try to explain some of these things. An heirloom tomato is an old-fashioned variety of tomato. Now, I'm not necessarily a big advocate of old-fashioned varieties on a lot of things. There's a reason that they came up with the new and improved, as opposed to the old and worse. A lot of times the old and worse really was old and worse. In the case of tomatoes, some of the new and improved were improved in ways that there was a price to pay, and what the price to pay was taste. Brandywine in particular is a variety that people really just love the taste of. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm not a tomato fan. I only know what people tell me because I don't like eating them. But everybody universally tells me if they've eaten a Brandywine tomato that that's what tomatoes are supposed to taste like. And so because of that, I feel pretty comfortable recommending it in general. And the heirlooms, you know, they had some really cool differences. There's white ones and yellow ones and rainbow ones and purpley black ones and bright red and orange and big and little and all kinds of cool, you know, variants. If you're looking for, you know, some attractiveness in your tomato salad, you certainly can do it with the heirlooms. Now,
but that comes at a price.
Absolutely. The disease resistance generally isn't there. So if you have a problem area where you've had problems with some of the tomato diseases in the past, probably heirlooms aren't the route to go. You need to go with something that's disease resistant. You're going to pay a price for the taste a little bit, but at least you'll have a plant and have fruit, whereas with the heirlooms in an infected area, you may not. So yeah, you have to make that decision. You have to try it. Maybe not put all your eggs in one basket.
That's a good point, and that's what I did here. I hedged my bets. I put 3 Better Boy disease-resistant new hybrid varieties in the one bed, and maybe I won't get as many tomatoes on these, but boy, when I get a few before the plants may succumb to some of those diseases, they're sure going to taste really nice and look really nice too in my salads, and so I'm willing to take that chance. So that's why I've got it half and half. And so that's all you got to do to plant a vegetable garden.
The only other thing that we didn't touch on, really, other than when you were talking about the peppers, was mulching. And you know, sometimes people say, "Well, I need to," you know, I read an article and I need to have this particular mulch. Anything that covers the soil surface. It doesn't, whether it's, you know, if it's functional but not necessarily attractive, like sheets of newspaper. Out in the backyard, that works fine. In the front yard, you can get, you know, really fancy and creative and use bark mulch or, you know, cocoa beans or anything like that. We always used to use, when I was a kid, all the weeds that we pulled, and I pulled a lot of them.
That's what I do.
You know, you pull the weed, you put it down, and it acts as a mulch. And it's recycling it, it's adding organic matter, you know, zero input, zero impact, I should say, because you're just taking what was there and leaving it there. And that really is... it's that easy. It really is that easy.
That easy. Make sure, I think and the other thing too is make sure that you don't bite off more than you can chew. If you start with 4 4x4, 3, what do I have, 4 here, 4 beds that are 4x4, that's a manageable amount of a vegetable garden. I think people go, oh, I'm going to plant the vegetable garden this year and make the 30 by 30 foot plot. And then gardening becomes a chore and not fun. Make it smaller, enjoy it, and you might not get enough to give to the neighbors, but you will enjoy it, and really that's the most important thing. I'm Tina Bemis.
And I'm Ed Bemis.
We wish you successful gardening.